So massive protests have broken out in Ukraine. These are anti-Zelensky protests. And no, you didn't hear that wrong. They're protesting Zelensky because of a bill that just went through the Rada in record time that is anti-corruption. I don't know if that is a good way of saying it, but they replace the independence of anti-corruption agencies, NABU and one other, with something. It's moved the line of authority to under the prosecutor's office, which is under the president's office. And the people in Ukraine appear to be very alarmed about this. I don't know if it's corrupt or if it's something more than what I'm detecting, but the people in Ukraine aren't happy about this. So let's look at this and see what's going on. So here, I like President Zelensky's evening post isn't out yet. So he was just dealing with the families of fallen warriors today. Had nothing to do with that. So I'm waiting for that to. So I don't have, this shouldn't be out of the oven because it's not fully baked, but I want to let you know what's going on. There's large protest in Kyiv tonight, the first signs of public dissent against Zelensky's government since the full-scale invasion, as demonstrators rally against the passing of a bill stripping anti-corruption bodies of their powers and of their independence. So these would be collapsed and put under the prosecutor's office, which they are very unhappy about. And I understand why. If what they're protesting against is in fact what's happening, I get that. A protest against the draft law on NABU and SAPO is underway in Kyiv on the square near Ivano-Franko Theater. Hundreds of residents in Kyiv and Dnipro took to the streets to protest against an outrageous bill restricting the independence of anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine. Again, this is nationwide. It's not just happening in Kyiv. It's in other places as well. And again, so it just passed through the Rada today with a wide enough margin that it seemed like it wasn't like a 3 people margin or something. It was a wide enough margin. And then as I understand, if I understand Ukrainian legal mechanisms through Parliament, Zelensky can't sign it until tomorrow. So I think they're trying to keep him from signing it today, or before tomorrow. Welcome to anti-government protests in Ukraine. It's been a while since you saw something like this. It's been so there've been some small protests around Ukraine, but nothing of the size and scale that you see like this. Here's Rick the Ukrainian talking about it and talking about Sternenko's reply to it. And this is very instructive for us trying to understand what their perspective is.
It's fucking outrageous. Let's go and translate how Sternenko reacted for this. That's his text, and let me translate it into English real quick. I'm doing it in another browser, so you cannot see the text there, but I'm going to read it out loud. What happened in Verkhovna Rada is an act of internal sabotage in wartime conditions. That's the statement of Sternenko.
Now, Sternenko is a guy that has raised millions for Ukraine, for drones and other fundraising projects. He's a respected voice, and so he's nobody to ignore. And he's calling this internal sabotage.
Even now, I see widespread public rejection of this initiative. Military personnel, volunteers, civic activists, and overwhelming majority are outraged by the MP's actions. Such a decision by Parliament deeply demoralizes people and lays the groundwork for internal division and confrontation.
Yeah, and that's really a problem here. Right now, when Ukraine needs to be unified more than ever, this internal division is bad, and it's an unforced error. They didn't need to do what they're doing, it appears, and
It determines trust. It undermines trust in state institution. Exactly, institutions. In times of war, survival is only possible through unity. A country whose government loses the support of its citizens cannot effectively resist an aggressor. That is a given. This is a gift to Moscow, more effective than any disinformation campaign combined.
Oh, and be sure that the disinformation campaign is going to start, and it's going to start in earnest very quickly. They're probably already writing it up in RT and Sputnik right now.
All is not yet lost. The president can veto or refuse to sign the bill. I hope he does. NABU and SOP must remain independent institutions.
Okay, so what's going on? There's two anti-corruption bodies that search out anti-corruption. And I talked about this in another video, and I'll show you that video in a little bit, just so you can see what it is. And that you want them to be independent so that they're not, being pressured by anyone, and they're able to conduct anti-corruption. And Ukraine has gone a long way towards anti-corruption over the last decade. I mean, they've really moved and moved and moved and gone away from what they had been in the past. Okay, but here's the first anti-government protest in Ukraine since 2022 or 2021, something like that. They're chanting, veto the law, veto the law. That's what the participants are shouting at protests in Kyiv against the law to gut Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies. Meanwhile, it is rumored that President Zelensky has already signed the bill to bring the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and a special anti-corruption prosecutor under general prosecutor's control. But I don't believe that that's actually the case. I could be wrong, but I got this from a reasonable authority that they have to wait a day. Again, a protest against authorities' decisions earlier today to kill Ukraine's anti-corruption infrastructure. First mass protest in Ukraine since the full-scale invasion of Russia. Look, this is not, you haven't seen this for a while. And remember, Ukrainians had 2014 big protests. You had 2004, the Orange Revolution, right? Ukrainians, they're not going to just roll over. Okay, let's keep going. Now the timing is pretty terrible for this. Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustin Umerov, is going to be in Istanbul tomorrow trying to negotiate. And what do you think Moscow's paying attention to this. What do you think the Russian negotiators are going to be using with this information about? Do you think that they're going to be talking about how, see, we can't even negotiate with Zelensky. See how corrupt he is? Yeah. Okay, there haven't been any anti-Zelensky protests since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. As the Ukrainian society realized that to survive, it must stay united. Today's move, unless reversed, is likely to change that. This could be big. This could be one of the biggest stories of the entire war. I hope it is not. I hope it just fizzles out, isn't signed, things move on. But wow. Soldiers on the front are particularly infuriated. And wouldn't you be if you were on the front fighting for Ukraine and then you thought that some kind of corruption was being pushed back into law where they're going to protect their own? Okay. It's no exaggeration that Ukrainian public opinion is an absolute firestorm after the parliament today approved a law essentially dismantling independent anti-corruption agencies just days after the SBU raided key investigators. The law isn't enacted until Zelensky signs it. Okay. Ukraine just voted to dismantle this anti-corruption law. This was Ukrainian Pravda in English. It was 263 out of 324. So it was by a pretty wide margin. Zelensky, this is Andrew Perpetua, Zelensky not having vetoed this idiotic bill already says everything you need to know about him as a leader and as an individual. I don't think that's fair. I think, Zelensky is under a ton of pressure, but this is a bad sign that he hasn't vetoed the law, and we'll see how this all plays out. Again, I don't have all the facts, so please if you know things about this, put in the comments below. Inform me, inform the rest of the audience, other people that are watching this. I want to know what's going on with this too, and I try to be as fair and objective with my earlier video as possible. The persona he's presented to the world is BS, says Perpetua, even with almost unanimous rejection within his country and from outside partners. He isn't backing down. When you screw up so badly, this is good commentary, this part here. When you screw up so badly that all of your enemies tell you to stop and all of your allies tell you to stop, it's a pretty good sign to stop. With that, there's a reason that people are upset. And yeah, okay. Here's another commentary. How bad is the reaction to this new law in Ukrainian social media? People are openly calling for demonstrations, not anonymous bots, but relatively known figures, like the one that Rick read, Sternenko. It's the first time I've seen such an idea gain support. Not a good sign for Zelensky's administration. Again, happening now, largest protest of wartime Ukraine is underway. Central Kyiv over President Zelensky's push to dismantle the country's independent anti-corruption agencies. Thousands of protesters and more pouring in chants of shame, among others. They demanded Zelensky veto the law passed this morning in Parliament in his office direction. Now, remember, there's a bigger story here, and that is that if you want to have the support of the EU and international bodies that are trying to arm you to fend off Russia, and you really need to be transparent, and you need to show that you're not engaged in corrupt activities. Like that's really, really important right now. Okay, back to this. Corruption equals death, says one side. Thousands gathered under Zelensky's presidential office in Kyiv. Yeah, this is big. Now, I talked about this earlier. I tried to show you all the papers, what they had to say, and it could be nothing. It could be something very significant. I think the Ukrainians seem to think that it's something significant, and that's why they're protesting. So the best face of it is that the NABU was somehow compromised, and they're trying to move it under different authority in order to make sure that everything's going okay. The worst face, and that's the best face, and I'm not sure that that's even a thing, or that's even like why. The worst case is that there's corruption, and they're protecting corruption, and that would be really bad right now. Okay, large crowds are gathering. This is Che Bowles from RT. Large crowds are gathering to protest against dictator Zelensky's disbandment of the anti-corruption agencies in a rushed vote in an unelected parliament. Well, it's an elected parliament. It was a rushed vote, and Russia is starting to make hay of that. Here's another from RT. Thousands chant shame in Kyiv. Largest protest of wartime Ukraine, according to the Financial Times. Triggered by Parliament's vote to strip anti-corruption agencies of their independence. Okay, so that's what we know. At this point, that's what we know. There are protests, and this is why. Go back to that last video if you want to have some of the background, because I tried to lay that out for you. I'll leave you with this. Jay in Kyiv, it's a more positive note, even though this looks like a pretty bad scenario. While peaceful protests occurred tonight in Kyiv over a new law that demonstrators would like to overturn, a couple of Russians went to Moscow's Duma to picket the new law that criminalizes 5,500 search topics and makes using VPN illegal. They were promptly arrested. So there is a difference, and we hope to keep that difference. And I think that's what these protesters are hoping to keep. They're hoping to keep that difference. And I don't have all the facts. If you can help me, help us understand, we're learning together, put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.